If you ever want to learn something about yourself and those around you, I highly recommend losing your voice. I have, of course, lost my voice for a day or two before, but this summer, there were weeks when I was literally speechless. Suddenly, and a bit sheepishly, I realized that I spend a lot of time talking. Exuberantly extroverted, I tend to bubble over with ideas that I want to share, conducting conversations like a game of pickleball with fast-paced volleys back and forth. And without a voice, I was completely discombobulated. I still, of course, had a way to communicate via text or email or chat, but it was slow to the point of frustration, slow to the point that it made me question how important each thing that I wanted to say really was. Was it worth typing? Was it worth the waiting? Oftentimes I had to admit it wasn't. And so it was that I began the process of calling all of my in-person appointments to let them know that we would have to reschedule. Until one member responded, "You don't need a voice for this. I'm not coming to you for your speaking. I'm coming to you for your listening." I kept that meeting, and it has changed me ever since. When was the last time that you just listened without speaking? It's not actually all that easy. So much of us wants to jump in, to comment, to add to the conversation. But much more than we think, we are called on not for our speaking, but for our listening. Our Parsha today, Nitzavim, poignantly promises, Ki tishma b'kol Adonai, when we listen to the voice of God, shavta, we will return with our whole heart and soul. We will return when we listen. That is the work of this season. Okay, so if that's the case, what does listening look like? Well, New York Times author Adam Bryant suggests that good listening begins with the acronym WAIT, W-A-I-T, which stands for Why Am I Talking? Often, when we ask that question, we'll discover that actually there's no good reason. Bryant proposes that we don't just need to learn to listen. We need to listen to learn. When we lean in, when we imagine that the person who is speaking, any person who is speaking to us, has something to teach us, by listening, we can expand our empathy, expand our connection, expand our view of not just the person before us, but of the world around us. As he quotes, "It's better to be interested than interesting." He shares a story that he heard from J.W. Bill Marriott Jr., the executive chairman of Marriott International, from when he was just a boy. Dad's friend, Marriott reminisced, was Ezra Taft Benson, who was the Secretary of Agriculture and later became president of the LDS Church. And he invited Ike and Mamie Eisenhower. So here's the president and the Secretary of Agriculture, and here's my father, and here I am. And they wanted to go and shoot some quail, but it was cold and it was blowing like crazy. And my dad said, should we go and shoot some quail, or should we stand by the fire? And Eisenhower turned around and looked at me and said, what do you think we should do? Mr. Marriott added, that made me realize how he got along with de Gaulle, Churchill, Roosevelt, and others by including them in the decision and asking them what they thought. So he said that as he grew, he tried to adapt that style into his management practices. He said, as I progressed through my life, I asked people, what do you think? Now, he admitted, he didn't always go with what they thought. But, he said, I felt that if I included them in the decision-making process, and if I asked them what they thought, and I really listened and considered it, that they usually got on board because they knew that they had been respected and heard, even if I wound up going in a different direction than they were recommending. Mr. Marriott concluded, what do you think are the 4 most important words in the English language? Do try this at home. Invite this question of your kids, your spouse, your friends, your colleagues, people you just happen to meet, because what do you think is expansive. It fills our lives and our relationships with more possibility. 4 letters, W-A-I-T, wait. 4 words, what do you think? Have a companion in the most important phrase, what for? Have you ever wondered why the most well-known, the most central prayer of our people is the Shema, listen? I love this word because any child will tell you that it's made up of 2 parts, sh and ma. In Hebrew, the prefix sh means that, which, or who. In English, of course, it is shh, shush. Taken together, it is a charge to us. Shush, so that you can give attention to that which or who is before you. Then ask ma, which in Hebrew means what? What am I called to understand? What would it look like for us to do this? Shh, ma. Our world is so filled with so much heartache, so much polarization, so much discord. But this shh, ma, can offer us and guide us to a different way. The way that writer Charles Swindoll came to at one time in his life when he was super busy and super stressed. Charles was running from commitment to commitment with no time to slow down. In his book, Stress Fractures, he reflects, I was snapping at my wife and children, choking down food at meal times, and feeling irritated at unexpected interruptions throughout the day. Before long, he continued, things around our home started reflecting the pattern of my hurry-up lifestyle. It was becoming unbearable. I distinctly remember at supper one evening the words of our younger daughter, Colleen. She wanted to tell me something important that had happened to her at school that day. She began hurriedly, Daddy, I want to tell you something, and I'll tell you really fast. But for Charles, these words hit him like a ton of bricks. He stopped in his tracks, got down, and looked her in the eye, and softly said, "Honey, you can tell me, and you don't have to tell me really fast. Say it slowly." To which she replied, "Then listen slowly." At this season, we are called to listen more slowly, to wait, to ask ourselves, why am I talking? To inquire more often and with more open sincerity, what do you think? And shh, so that we can hear the ma. We don't even need to lose our voices to do it. Because as Winston Churchill is said to have taught, courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. If we can do that, then it will truly be a Shana Tova. Shabbat Shalom.